Welcome to the chaos. I decided in August 2025 that Halloween this year I would run a one-shot, and I thought what better one-shot to do than the Death House from Curse of Strahd. Now, the Death House is not a one-shot, so I did have to do some adaptations. I don't want to give any spoilers for the adventure or for Curse of Strahd. I've actually never played or run Curse of Strahd or any part of it before. I would love to run Curse of Strahd. I want to play it first. The whole idea came about because I have the Scales and Ales Tavern from Dungeons and Lasers, and I thought I can probably turn this into the Death House. I decided to only do the 4 stories of the house. I didn't do a roof. I could have done, but it would have just been too much time and pressure. And I did a single dungeon level, so that is less than there is in the actual Death House. I also changed some of the monsters, adjusted the story a bit, things like that. So let's see where it all began. The first thing I did was to try and assemble one floor just to check I could actually do it before embarking on the project. This set is comprised of a fantasy starter set and then some sprues of the Tudor Mansion. I also had one additional Tudor Mansion sprue. However, you'll notice the Death House has 4 stories. I needed an attic level. Luckily, I already owned and had painted up one of the wooden cottage kits, and I simply ordered a second one so that I would have enough pieces for the full Death House. I used desert sand from Colourforge as a primer and then slapped on a nice coat of wildwood contrast paint, and then did a little dry brush with Sylvaneth bark just to lift it a bit so it wouldn't look so flat. I decided to start with the attic terrain first, simply because I already had one set painted up, and so it was going to be the quickest one to do. This painted up really quickly. The longest stage was just waiting for the contrast paint to dry. Then it was time to get started on the Tudor Mansion pieces. I primed these with Colourforge Whitebone and then went in with Vallejo Cream White on the little sections of wall between the supporting beams. Now, I found that when I tried to use a wet palette with this paint, it went very, very bubbly, and a little search on Google informed me this was not unique to me, so that is why I'm not using a wet palette for it. I do have a pot of clean water just out of shot though. Don't worry, I'm not painting with a completely dry brush. I decided to paint everything by hand because whilst I do own an airbrush, I really haven't had a chance to practice with it yet, and I just was not confident in my ability to use it on the terrain. However, I have to say, I never ever want to paint this big a project by hand again. It took me 4 to 6 hours of painting every day for almost 2 months to get everything finished. One thing I will say about D&L terrain, it is gorgeous. There is so much detail on these pieces. I didn't want to just do this as plainly as I had done the wooden cottage terrain. I picked out Sons of Forest Green because I absolutely love that colour, and then just painted in some of the decorative aspect. I did apply 2 layers of both of these base colours. Then it was time to break out good old faithful wildwood and fill in the areas that I wanted to look like wood. I'd say that painting up these walls was the most boring part of doing all of this terrain. I enjoyed it, but it was so time consuming. I painted as neatly as I could. I still had to go back and tidy up. Then painted up some of the single walls and windows using the same colours as I did on the double walls. Whilst I did some dry brushing on the wooden cottage terrain pieces, I decided not to do it on these because it took so long just to do the base coat and then get it tidied up. I knew if I started going in there with a dry brush or trying to do any highlights, not only was it going to take forever, but I was going to have to go around again and tidy up the mess I would inevitably make. I can always go back and paint more detail onto this if I want to, but in all honesty, I think I'm probably just going to leave it as it is. The top edges of the walls are looking a little messy, as are the sides of the floors. So rather than trying to paint on Wildwood and risk a patchy finish, I use this AK Real Paint marker in brown just to colour the edges. It dries a little less yellow than it goes on. Approximately 2.5 weeks later, it's all finished, thank God. Now I can build. So here I am mapping out the attic level of the Death House map. I used the ones provided by the pre-written module as a guide. However, due to the nature of the terrain, I couldn't build the rooms exactly to size. The smallest Dungeons and Lasers tile is a 4x4 square, and you also get double tiles, which are 2x8. They do double walls and single walls. If you've never assembled it before, you cannot put a single wall crossing a double wall. The pieces will just not fit together. So there is quite a bit of trial and error, not only with arranging the floors, but making sure the wall sections I use are all compatible with one another. There was a fair bit of assembling, disassembling and reassembling going on. Everything clips together and the clips sit nice and flush so you can get a really good, tight, strong fit. Once I'd assembled each level, I was able to lift them and move them about. I tried not to do it too much, but nothing started to fall apart, which is excellent. And now for the 3 main floors of the Death House. At first, I was trying to put window tiles where there were windows on the map, but I soon realised I was going to run out of window tiles super fast. So there were windows on my map where there were no windows and vice versa. Some of the doors were in different locations again, and the sizes of the rooms ended up being, for the most part, slightly larger than the actual Death House map. But I'm quite impressed by how close I was actually able to get. And here is the final fully assembled Death House. You can see as well, I've managed to get the 3rd floor balconies. There's 2 of those. I'm very happy. I did cheat a bit for my 1 dungeon level using Prismacast pre-painted terrain from Dungeons and Lasers, which I already owned. Let's be honest, the Prismacast is better than any paint job I could ever do. It's a great time saver and I am perfectly happy with the quality. So with all the battle maps assembled, it's time to start the lengthy process of priming and painting the furniture. As with the maps, I tried to be as faithful as possible when it came to the scatter terrain in the house and the dungeon. However, there were rooms which had way more furniture than I could possibly fit on my little dungeon map, so I did cut a few things out. I'm just painting up some fireplaces here. And you can't have a Halloween one-shot without at least a few skeletons lying about. These were so easy to do. I did a primer coat of white bone, covered it with Seraphim sepia, and then just a dry brush with some Ushabti bone and then Screaming Skull for the highlights. If only everything had been this simple to do. The spiral red marble staircase is a central feature of 3 of the 4 floors of Death House. If you've seen the ordering terrain from Temu video I did, you'll see the staircases I ordered. These are the ones I actually used. I ended up using an AK Real Paint marker to colour in the steps, followed by a dry brush of corn red. I really should have painted them before building them. It's time now to paint the big bad. So I don't want to give spoilers for The Death House, but my big bad is not the same big bad in the written adventure. Let's just call this guy Baby Walter. So, primed with white bone. The base I have already painted up. I just used Skaven Blight Dinge, Storm Vermin Fur and Rattling Grime, and then I used the AK flat black marker just to rim the base. I know it's not the most exciting base, but this adventure is due to be run in about a week. So I have to paint fast, and unfortunately that means because I've only been painting about a year, sometimes I can't do all the detail that I want to. I just need them to be tabletop ready, and then I can always go back over them. So I got this model from Rum and Resin on Etsy. Check out my video on them if you haven't already done so. So you can see you've got limbs and some faces in this creature. I want it to look like rotting and decaying flesh with wounds. You can see here you've got boils and pustules, so I really want to make them pop, pun intended. So I'm going to do my best. I'm going to begin with 2 base coats of Ironrath skin from Citadel. This was actually a really lovely mini to paint and a nice change from painting furniture. 2 coats of Ironrath skin later. I haven't done the teeth or the gums, and you may notice I haven't pushed the paint into all the recesses, but they're going to be a different colour. So the next step is to make it look more fleshy. So I'm going to give it a quick dry brush of Kislev flesh, just to give it more of that kind of decaying skin tone. Please excuse the horrendous state of my palette. That is the dry brush done. So the next step is a wash. So I'm actually going to be using a 50-50 mix of water and Carroburg Crimson, and then I'm also going to water it down even more. Not something you normally want to do with contrast paints because it makes them patchy, but that is exactly the effect I'm going for. I want this to look like mottled skin. I've put some undiluted Carroburg Crimson into the wounds and on the pustules. I'm going to go over those with some Druchii Violet just to give it that sort of reddish purple, raw, decaying kind of look. I do like how he's looking. Then a few highlights and just painting the skulls and hands and other details up, and he's done. Finally, just 4 days before the game was due to be run, the Death House is complete. 4 stories plus a dungeon, fully furnished. I am really happy with how this turned out. You can see some of the space in the rooms is quite tight, so I decided when running it I would only have minis actually in-house if they happen to be in combat or a situation that required them to have the minis on the board. The rest of the time they could just use it as a guide as they move through the rooms in the Death House. I don't know if I'll ever actually build this as a tavern or if I might bring it out every Halloween. We'll see. This is a quick overview of the dungeon level. And finally, game day. Here's a sneaky look behind my DM screen. I've got a laser pointer because I'm short and I can't reach the maps. So you open the door, and as you press on it, it's not locked, which seems a little strange, and it creaks open and you throw in your tooth. You can see the hallway beyond is narrow, and there's another set of doors at the end of it which are closed. And along the walls are portraits of family members who probably weren't liked enough to be in the main house. That's all that you see. I ran 3 groups in total, 2 on Saturday, 1 on Sunday, and every group was so different, and the adventure each of them had, despite being the same setting, the same encounters, they were all so different. It was a lot of fun. So a huge thank you to everyone who came and played. Maybe I'll do it again next year. We'll see. I need to recover from this year first. Thanks for watching and happy gaming.